The sound was small and embarrassing. A pathetic little grunt as the air was punched from his lungs. He lay there, tasting copper and dust, and let his breath find its way back to him. When he tried to stand, his ankle buckled with a white-hot scream, and he collapsed back onto the cold stone. His headlamp, which had skittered away in the fall, was still shining. Its beam was pinned on a single, massive stalagmite, making it look like a pale, accusing finger pointing up from the floor of the earth. He was deep underground, injured, and utterly alone. And as the absolute crushing silence of the cave settled around him, he realized the dark was speaking in its sleep. It was whispering a name. Hey friends, you're in Dreamcatcher Stories, your cozy corner for stories that got lost along the way. Hit me up in the comments and tell me how this one hits you. Now, let's get sneaky and peek behind the curtain. Our story begins in the late autumn of 2019, when the first cold front of the season slid over northern Arkansas and turned the Ozark hardwoods the color of banked embers. A freelance writer named Lysander Pike was driving his old slate-colored pickup toward the Boston Mountains, chasing a story. Folklore in those hills travels farther than cell service, and Pike had a quiet hunger for the kind of tales that could hold a room the way a hymn holds a chapel. He wasn't a ghost hunter. He preferred the living. But a cryptic tip had landed in his inbox about a cave above a dry creek bed on a limestone ridge the locals called Sparrow's Spine. A cave that, according to the message, took and kept things. A cave that talked when the wind was right. The note had been signed only with the name Thaddeus and a promise to meet at a crossroads in Kingston. But Thaddeus never showed. He sent one last text that read, "Simply go before the hunters wake the ridge," and then his line went dead. Pride can be a poor lantern, but it was the only one Pike had, so he went anyway. He parked at the trailhead just after daybreak. The signboard, riddled with bullet holes, warned of karst hazards, sinkholes, sudden drop-offs, flash flooding. A single faded violet ribbon was tied to the post, as if someone had left a reminder for themselves and never returned. He shouldered his pack and walked until the gravel turned to bare rock, and the bare rock turned to dead leaves that whispered with each step. The entrance to Moonbird Cave didn't look like a mouth so much as an eyelid, half closed against the light. The air at the threshold was a shock, instantly cooling the sweat on his skin. Beyond it, the world tightened and thinned. The first chamber was low, forcing him to crawl before he could stand again. Inside, sound changed its mind about what it wanted to be. Every step made a small thunder. Every breath carried farther than it needed to. He clicked on his headlamp, and the walls sprang forward, racked and pitted and damp. He said his own name out loud, a trick he'd read about to stay anchored underground. "Lysander Pike," he said, and his voice came back in tatters. "Present," he added, because that felt necessary. He moved deeper. Time lost its usual close. After what might have been an hour, he found a place where the ceiling rose and the room widened. A tumble of breakdown stones made a rough staircase to a second level. Off to his left, a passage narrowed into a keyhole slit. A cold draft stroked his cheek there, like a hand washed in creek water. He pulled out his small digital recorder and pressed the button. The red dot bloomed. At first, he heard nothing but his own breath. Then it came, as soft as lint, a voice tucked into the breeze. Not words, not yet, but a cadence, as if someone were trying to speak with a mouthful of sleep. The hair along his forearms lifted. He tilted the microphone toward the slit and waited. The wind deepened, and something like a name threaded through the air. Thad, Thad, Thad. He swallowed hard. "Thaddeus?" he whispered, and the cave returned one long ta. like a string being pulled through a ring. If this was a prank, it was exquisite. If it was geology, it was a coincidence. Wearing a mask. He told himself he would not wedge his shoulders through that aperture. He went in anyway. The keyhole shaved his jacket and grated his belt buckle. He exhaled and slid, held his breath, wriggled, then fell 2 body lengths into a sump of cold air where the floor dropped without being polite about it. And that is when he found himself on the ground, ankle screaming, staring at that single, accusing stalagmite. He checked his ankle. A bad sprain. He could put weight on it, but it would be a painful bargain. He gathered his lamp, his pride, and the little recorder. He meant to reverse his route, but the fissure he had slid through had become another fissure, then another. The tight throat that had admitted him became a dozen throats wearing the same expression. He tried one, then a second, then a third, and came back to the same room where his scuff marks crossed themselves like a bad signature. Heat rose under his jacket. Panic tends to oversalt the soup. He sat on his pack and drank lukewarm coffee from his thermos. He told the dark who he was again, not because the dark needed to know, but because he did. Lysander Pike, he said, present, not lost yet. His voice cracked on the last word. The second day was a braid of trial and error. He marked every stone he climbed with a pencil, left arrows on damp surfaces, and dripped coffee to stain the floor where the pencil could not find purchase. The room sprawled into other rooms. The keyhole gave way to a trench. The trench stepped down into a vault where the ceiling was night and his lamps were starlight. And in that vault, something waited. Bones rested in a pocket of dust, not scattered by predators, but set aside the way a man sets aside his hat before sleep. A tin canteen, pitted and mended with solder, a blackened pipe, a scrap of blue cloth that had once belonged to a shirt, and a name scratched into the limestone with a nail or a luckier rock, Thad. The letters were deep, the way a person carves when they do not plan to leave quickly. His throat closed. He touched the T, the H, the A, the D. The wind moved, and the scrap of blue cloth stirred. He didn't know what he expected to hear. A prayer, a confession. What he heard was a hush, like a tired breath. Then a voice, so close to his ear that he flinched and struck his shoulder against the stone. Lysander, the cave said, almost kindly, then lower, a word that sounded like stay. No, he said out loud, and the word fled in a panic that felt like his own. He didn't know if he was speaking to the stone or to the part of himself that began to understand how easy it would be to stay. There is a mercy to it. No bills, no deadlines, no questions about whether you wasted your luck. Just yes and no. Breath and no breath. He tied the blue cloth around his wrist and stood. Just then, his radio crackled once, like a match being struck. A voice arrived, faint as ash. Search and rescue, the voice said. Identify. He sat down hard. His own name felt extravagant. Lysander Pike, he said. Moonbird Cave. Sparrow Spine. Sprained ankle. Diminishing light. Food for a day and a half if I am careful. Water for maybe 2. I do not know the time. I am not sure how far in I am. I am not alone. The last sentence left his mouth before he could censor it. Static returned. Then the voice, clearer. Repeat last. The dispatcher said, Are you with a second party? He looked at the bones, the canteen, the quiet blue cloth tied to his wrist. He closed his eyes. Negative, he said. Not a second party. Just an impression. I am sorry. Copy, the voice said. Stay put if you can. We will stage at the trailhead. Conserve your battery. We will call again. The third day, when hunger became a new religion, the cave started to show its temper. A rush of air came down the trench, as if somebody had opened a door in a big house. Pebbles skipped across the floor. A thin trickle of dust sifted from the ceiling. His lamps were growing old, the beams jumpy as a fevered animal. He rationed them, sitting in the absolute dark, listening to his own heartbeat. The radio cracked again. A woman's voice this time, steady and brisk. Lysander Pike, this is Deputy Marigold Tiller with the Madison County Sheriff's Office. We have 2 teams on the ridge. We need you to speak every half minute for the next 5 minutes. Use the word lantern. We will listen for your voice. Lantern, he said. And the word traveled until he could hear it, returning from places he had no wish to meet. He struck his canteen against a knob of stone. The cave took the ring and tuned it like a piano wire. Lantern? He said again. Good. Deputy Tiller's voice returned. Hold. He held. Time settled on his shoulders like an unfamiliar coat. Then, ghost thin, 3 shrill whistles stuttered across the vault. He brought his fingers to his lips and blew 2 whistles back, small and apologetic. The cave gathered them up and returned something like courage. Good, a man's voice said. Then, silence. Then a boom. Somewhere far off, the radio hissed. Deputy Tiller's voice crossed the hiss like a stepping stone. Mr. Pike, we have a barometric drop. Radar shows a pop-up cell on the county line. If water enters the system, we will have to pull back. We are pushing 1 more team toward you. If the water finds you first, climb. Do you copy? Climb. He copied. The word climb found very little to hold on to inside him. The wind came first, not a friendly draft, but a force that shouldered its way in without apology. The cave spoke in a lower register. Then he heard it. It was not a roar at first. It was a sound like a classroom of children whispering, then like prairie wind in a fence, then like a sudden 1,000 hands clapping once. When it rounded the bend below, it brought a smell that made him think of a river wrenching its way through winter. The first lick of water ran across his boot and chilled him straight through to his lung. He limped toward the highest part of the vault, where the walls narrowed into a chimney. He shoved his back into one side and his boots into the other, and made his way up like an awkward beetle. Halfway up, the water arrived in force. He found a small shelf, as wide as his hips, and dragged himself onto it. He pressed his chest to the stone and shook. The water spoke louder now, the way a crowd speaks on courthouse steps. It filled the trench, licked the edge of the shelf, and then, mercifully, stopped, as if it had remembered an appointment elsewhere. He learned then that gratitude can be as physical as hunger. He cried without sound, and the cave took the salt and made no remark. When he woke, the cave had gone back to its long patience. His lamps met each other's eyes like exhausted friends. He ate the last of the jerky and sucked the last drops from the canteen. He read from a small book of ballads until the words felt like people in the room. When he read a stanza about a woman who waited at a window for 3 winters, a draft lifted the page and turned it for me. He laughed, a thin thread of sound. The voices returned, nearer than before, not from the radio, but from the doorways of the earth. He heard the careful clink of a carabiner. Mr. Pike, a man said, his voice low, if you can hear me, strike your lamp twice. He did. 2 small flares on the shelf. The light met other light and made a modest marriage in the air. A helmeted face appeared below the lip of the shelf. Then another. Name's Cormac. The first man said, "This is Iona. We've got you." He made a sound that could have been any child's first word. They harnessed him, and the route out was not the route in. They rose through the chimney, the three of them breathing like a small choir. At the last squeeze, Cormac went first. "Exhale," he said, calm as weather. "Let the ribcage be an accordion. You are an accordion, friend. Good. Now slide." He slid. The rock took a tax in skin and pride. On the other side, the air moved with a rhythm he recognized from every porch he had ever sat on. Outside, the sky had the exact blue of enamelware. Deputy Marigold Tiller stood by the signboard with the ribbon and the bullet holes, holding 2 cups of something steaming. "You had us worried, Mr. Pike," she said. 3 days is not nothing. The rich is greedy this year." He saw the blue cloth still tied around his wrist. She saw it too. "He's been missing since the summer of 2014, she said, her voice soft. "Folks have guesses. We do not say them out loud." He touched the knot. "I found his name in there," he said, "and a pipe, and a canteen." She nodded as if they were talking about rain barrels. "We will go back when the water is done being a fool," she said. "We will bring him what we can." He drank the broth she gave him. It tasted like somebody's grandmother had stood at a stove and decided he would need forgiving. Later, they went back in. They found the pipe and the canteen and the letters on the wall. They found what they could, and a family had a place to stand and say a man's name into the air. She did not say the word closure. She did not need to. Some endings arrive like doors shutting softly in a house you once lived in. And there we go. Another memory back from the dark. Don't go too far. I've got more mysteries itching to be told. What do you think was speaking to Lysander in that cave? Was it just the wind and his own mind, or was the ghost of Thad trying to be found? Let me know your theories in the comments below.